Hello again. Hello, dear Jeremy. Sorry for such interruption.
Oh, that's
This
okay.
is this is this is technology. This is literature and technology. Okay, so before I give open the floor for other questions, I have a question, dear Jeremy, especially that I when I read your stories, I have like many of the questions about your fictional universe. And I will give you an example from a short story that I read. Sorry for such a
Oh,
noise.
that's
Yeah.
technology too.
Yeah, so there is this example from a short story that I read, which is why it has soft edges, which is a story that I like a lot. So while reading this, I get the impression that Jeremy writes about a kind of dystopian vision. And I will quote you from the story, especially the opening, which starts, "My desires not really clear anymore. I would not say I am hungry nor full. Picture a cupboard with some cans. This world is simply too much for me to last anymore. It is so much information and news and doom scrolling." So, dear Jeremy, how would you qualify such universe?
I can give you a simple answer, then I'll give you a more literary answer. The simple answer,
Mhm,
it's the world right now.
mhm,
It's it's I mean, I talked to my friends with a gallows humor and I said, "Can you think of any dystopic narratives from our childhood that we're not in right now?" And we can't. Especially here in America. I mean, there was a band, a new wave band called Devo, and very interesting band, but that's actually a concept that doesn't get talked about very much. Evolution progresses forward, de-evolution, which is what Devo is short for, moves backwards. In a lot of ways in America, I don't know how it's perceived where you are, but in a lot of ways we're moving backwards as a country. So there is a definite de-evolution, and my perspective is basically I've always had certain themes that I write about. It's been a range, and I I can't help with my brain but not incorporate ideas of philosophy and everything, because that's just what I was going to say earlier, but I shifted gears in my head, was that I had an epiphany really quickly. I had an epiphany in graduate school, and I realized everything's connected. Everything that I could study, they're all related. There's aesthetics and everything. There's philosophy and everything. There's psychology and everything. There's beauty and ugliness and everything. There's dichotomies and everything, and that just opened up my mind to just try all these things that I've been doing. But I'm also trying to capture that in the stories. Like, how do you capture an existential crisis without being Camus Part Two?
Thank you so much. So, the floor for more questions from the students. Any question?
Extra credit.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, Mr. Omar. Omar,
Yeah,
I can. Okay.
thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you again.
Mhm,
Okay, I would like to arise another important issue when it comes to narrative archaeology. I find a very important element while reading your article. And I find that sometimes it's very appropriate and suitable and applicable when it comes to memory studies.
Mm.
Choosing an experience, and things that are blurred or things that have been forgotten or we want to forget them, especially events we want to forget or to remember while selecting this kind of information. And this is something very important. We are moving backward. Okay, with declarative writing or narrative, I think we are moving to the with GPS, with apps, especially if you raise an important question like Roland Barthes, the author. For example, visiting things, visiting places, visiting events, visiting experiences, but with a kind of reviving and, for example, shedding light on them, okay, while selecting them. This is
Hmm.
very important and very, it's very helpful when it comes to memory studies.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah, that's a really fascinating point. I almost did a project on the International Space Station, but I didn't have $400,000 unless you can lend me some. And I was doing research on how it would work, and I found, relating to back to your really interesting point, is that 90% of the American astronauts that saw the Earth from space came back and they had to go to therapy for depression. And I first thought, why is that? That's beautiful. That's something that we dream of, to see something from space. How amazing. And then what I found out, it took a lot of research to find, was that there's a certain beauty in incompletion. Like you're saying, if you remembered everything, that's actually a condition that people that have that can never have a functional life, because everything is short-term memory. So those astronauts, what happened, the depression was, I saw the Earth from space in its totality, and it's a big ball of mud. It's beautiful for a second, but the mystery's gone. I come home to my town, and I see the sunrise and sunset, and it feels precise, and it was depressing. So there really is something important about incompletion. And then one of the flaws, to be honest, in our project, I mean, I'll be honest, it's not perfect. I don't believe anything really can be, right? But I'm a subjectivist anyway. But we could only choose a certain number. You can only choose a finite number of things to put into any creative or practical work. And some people could say that was enough. Some could say it was too much. Some could say it was not enough. And what's also interesting that you bring up is that if you want to, like, if you see television shows where there's a child genius and they say memorize the entire deck of cards, that's the first thing I thought of when you were saying that, is that the way that they're able to do it is they picture a narrative. And as they flip through those cards a few times, I think they have maybe 5 minutes, I forget. They picture someone walking past a shore, there's a tree, there's a bench, there's, say, a dog, and that's all the cards, and that's how they remember. So that's what you touch on. That's actually, so we remember more deeply when we combine elements together. Otherwise, we will forget it. Interesting.
Now, I have another question there, Jeremy. What is your story with the ghost?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one interesting little side note about my novel is, if you buy my novel, I'm not saying you have to buy it, but I mean, if you buy it, what the publisher is actually a conceptual person that I know, and so when you buy the novel, there's a number, and we don't tell you why. It's actually numbered like Prince, and when we run out, there'll never be any novels sold again. And he's interviewed me twice on his radio show, but what we agreed on, he's slowly degrading the audio, so eventually it'll be unlistenable, so it's becoming a forgotten ghost. So the book will eventually be a ghost too, but how many books that you read 30 years ago do you remember anyway, unless it was your favorite? So there's that, and that's a really great thing you asked me, because I just taught my students this week. In an old dictionary, ghost was also defined as an error in an audio broadcast, so static, like we heard earlier, because it's a ghost. It exists and it doesn't, and it feels like it doesn't belong, which is debatable. If you take a photograph and there's a little lens flare, that was a ghost. If there's a bit of blur in a television image, that was seen as a ghost. But that's a fascinating. That's like a cultural, technological sort of ghost. And my wife and I, like my Italian ancestors came here in 1905. They were actually slaves in Brazil, which is a crazy story, on a plantation, and they escaped. I have a relative, and so does my wife, that because of something they did in the past, they're erased from our family records. They're suddenly gaps. So that's also a ghost. That's a family history ghost. And I've seen some ghosts. So ghosts to me is just such a resonant thing. Yeah, I have 3 books about ghosts. I didn't plan that at all.
Since you mentioned the book as a ghost, and reading that book by Prisma, like bookishness, the idea that the book itself has become a ghost in this digital technological environment.
Hmm.
So now, according to some people, like we don't read print books, but books are everywhere in the culture, online, like in the design, in the art. What can you tell me, dear Jeremy, about like the future of not books as like the in its electronic digital form, but the print book?
Wow, that's a fantastic question. I could talk for 2 hours on that one. One of the things that I'm working on, I mean, the other aspects of that are so fascinating too, but this might scare some people. I don't think it's scary, but I did a really simple project that actually now is a ghost because it got attacked by Russian hackers. It was full of porn and then it disappeared. But I created a nihilist existentialist chatbot that hated my writing, and I gave her about 400 lines of code. It's pretty simple. It's actually a site for teenagers. It was free, but she I showed my students were curious one time. I didn't show my students, and she asked them for their email and said I'm lonely, and I didn't code that, which is kind of whoa. Even a basic AI was getting a little bit sentient. So one of the things that I'm developing is so I write a novel. You have a print version, but you have an option for an auxiliary digital version. And if you choose to read the digital version, and I'm not going to tell you because otherwise it would feel like a gimmick, but as you read the digital version, a little chat box appears and it talks to you like a child. It's actually the book is a learning sort of child. And if you engage it, let's say only 10 people do, it'll ask you questions about your life and your interests and what do you like and not like of the book. What do you want to know more about? It's actually the book is a chat bot. And what it'll do, and I've designed how to do it, is it'll then when you log off, it'll search the internet and it'll go to databases and it'll actually rewrite itself. And so after time, those 10 people have a new book that I didn't write, but it's their friend. So that's an interesting area. What if there was an engagement you had with the book, and if not, and to go back to physical versus digital, I mean that's something that I mean, my original training is creative writing. So there was a big talk about 10, 15 years ago that the death of the book was the e-reader, and it hasn't happened. Sales of paper books has actually increased, just like records are now here in America the number one selling type of music. So there's something beautiful about the warmth of listening to a record. Like I used to be a musician, digital processing is cleaner, but it takes out a warmth that you have in the sound. It takes out a depth. So I personally, I could be wrong. I don't think the physical book will ever go away, but UC Santa Cruz is one of the first that was my dream school, so that's why I think of it. But UC Santa Cruz 5 years ago purged all their books, all their libraries. They threw all the books in the garbage, which to me was painful, but they're now replaced with digital files. So it's possible in academia you're not going to have those books behind you a couple generations from us. It's going to be digital files stored. But I think people will still prefer a book. There's something tactile. And one little tricky little thing I like to tell people is so there's an augmented reality machine or mixed reality machine, right? You turn it on, it creates a world, you're immersed in it, it entertains you, it educates you, you escape from the world, you see people and things and places and history comes alive, and you go, wow, what an amazing new technology. No, that's a novel. That's what novels have already done. You're just reading paper, but it triggers your imagination. So again, there's a crossover.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And by the way, like what is characteristic about you is your oscillation between the print and the digital, like the electronic. And the other thing that like I want the students to know about Jeremy is that he's not only a creative writer, he's also like a photographer. He's an artist. You are the like that kind of prolific writer, that kind of prolific artist. And what is good about this is that when we consider your art, when we consider your literature, when we consider your electronic literature, we can see that there is like a line, there is a commonality between all of them. They all deal with the same themes, they all deal with the same concerns, and it's also like I don't know if we can use the postmodern to describe this postmodern pastiche, this postmodern aesthetic, in which like there is no longer, we cannot identify clear-cut boundaries between the different disciplines, between different methods, and between different media. So now, if we go back to these statements by McLuhan, the medium is the message itself. So I don't know if there is another question, like from the students. Any other question?
I just saw a comment. I feel bad.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Miriam.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Miriam.
Yes.
The first female participant. Yes, Miriam.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really glad to be to join this meeting. I just want to ask about this concept of art and internet. I want to ask Mr. Jeremy about can we consider really net art as an art, and what are the aesthetic criteria for internet-based, let's say, artwork?
That's a fantastic question. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to give you a strange first part of the answer, but I taught computer science at UC San Diego while I was teaching art at another college, and kind of the same thing we're talking about. And a physics professor who was in his 70s was really upset, and they said, "Why are you so upset?" And he goes, "I don't know what this is." And one of his graduate students wrote a paper in emojis, and to him it was a travesty. It is kind of rude as a professor to give a paper in smiley crying faces and cucumbers and all that. But the TAs actually said, we read it, and it's actually an A paper. It's just in emojis. And so we're moving into so much that's about technology then now, but I would argue that it has a lot of the same roots in the past, like hieroglyphics. Maybe we're returning to a culture where we're so visually based because of our phones and everything, that's a new kind of hieroglyphics. Early Mandarin Chinese wasn't a tonal language. It was more pictorial, arguably, than hieroglyphics. It was about literally bird, cloud thing together, and you go, oh, that's the sky. Maybe we're returning to that, and that's a huge debate that people still have about net art, and that's one of the things that you're probably experiencing where you are. That happens here. Now there's finally people going, oh, digital art's art, but they're talking about NFTs that are just a monkey drawing. Or they're like, oh, it's someone that just throws a couple pictures, and in Photoshop you can click a button and it makes it seem like a painting. That's being now seen as the commercial digital art. That's not a lot of digital art. But then I could also say, but there's also a debate in a lot of different areas that I put my toes in, like the water, and they say, oh, code's not art. If it's on the internet, it's based on code. How could you not say code is creative? And code by itself is creative, and code's a language, and as an English professor here, language is a code. But no, that's an excellent point, because that's still being debated very intensely everywhere. That's an excellent question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't know if there is still another question. Yes, any other question?
Are there any questions in the chat?
I'm
not sure. I again apologize, I don't speak French.
Yeah. They are just asking questions about like the organization of the event itself. So because we have students from the French department, students from the English department, so we have the. Yes.
Can I ask? Sorry to cut you off.
Of course.
But I'm curious, what departments are the students in? I would love to know more about it.
Okay, so yes, so I can tell you we have the English departments, we have the French departments. What about the other departments? The students, please.
What are you studying? Anybody?
Yes. Yes, please. So I know Omar in the English department. Miriam is in the English department. Tunsi is in the English department. How about the others?
Me, Yusuf, English department.
Yusuf, English department, yes. Others?
You can type it in the chat if you feel
Yes,
shy.
yes, of course you can write it down.
I also know that silence sometimes is respectful. So
Yes. Yes.
oh, French. Okay. Yeah. Again, I'm sorry.
Okay.
My French is terrible.
Okay.
My
So,
French is.
dear Jeremy, I really want to thank you for sharing this moment with us. It was a great
Oh, my
moment,
pleasure.
and it was really a great pleasure. And I will really be interested, like in having another event, in another encounter with you as a follow-up to your projects of incorporating mathematics into your work. This is, for me, it's very interesting,
Oh, thank you. It's
especially
fascinating.
in cultures in which we still have clear-cut boundaries between science and fiction, science and imagination. And we all know that without imagination, there will be no science. You cannot invent something if you don't imagine it first. Like imagination is very important. So I don't know if there is something to say, like to
Light is
close this encounter. Yes.
Oh no, I mean my students in my English and writing classes ask me. They go, so who are I? Oh my gosh, that light is driving me crazy. Oh, I see. Okay, I have to stand like this. It's the morning here, so it's putting a weird superhero light on me. I don't like, but I'm not a superhero. But no, you again touch on something that's been so crucial in my entire life, which is I asked my students on the first day. I say, if you could take anyone from history and you could spend an afternoon with them and bring them back to life and ask them questions, who would they bring? And you get a really interesting range of people from history and a broad range of what they've done and fields that they were in. My greatest heroes, a couple of them are writers, a couple of them are artists. They're mostly scientists and mathematicians. It's just always been that way. There's something so beautiful and poetic to me about like Buckminster Fuller or Nikolai Tesla. I love that Einstein, like there's a mythology really quickly. I mean, I don't, people probably already know this, but there's a mythology that Einstein was a bad student. He wasn't a bad student. That's not true. That's just a sexy story that people spread. It's incorrect. He was a good student, but he was frustrated in class because he already knew the answers, and he was really upset because he was thinking about light and time and space all the time, and it wasn't addressed in the curriculum. And nothing wrong with that, but that's just how as an educator I tell my students, I go, I write chapters for academic books, and no offense to the professors here, but they tend to be a few years beyond the cutting edge because it has to be accepted by academia. So I encourage my students, I go, get frustrated, have something that you don't understand or something that you feel isn't being addressed, because that's probably what's going to make us study you later on. Einstein had a job. He refused to go to grad school with his friends and be a professor right away. And they thought that that was a mistake. That was the thing that people saw as a failure, not bad grades. But he was sitting there at a job at a typewriter for low wages. And he kept imagining if a man was on a roof and he jumped and he fell, not a suicide, but just the physics of it. That was the origin of his first of his three papers that changed the world. Those are films. Again, that's the crossover. That's a film that's very creative. Oh, thank you, Kaza. So what you touched upon, I think like meteorology, I had to make a decision. I really want to get a PhD. I wanted to be a field researcher. That was my dream. My family was like, oh, you could be, my family said, oh, you can be on TV doing the weather. No, 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 no. I want to be a researcher on a computer. That's what I've always wanted. But science is beautiful. Oh yeah, here's the last thing that on the crossover. If Murad made a 3-hour movie and it was brilliant, and he made his students and the students here watch it, no offense, Murad, but if you made a beautiful movie and it had no clear structure, wouldn't you go, oh my God, when is this going to be over? There has to be a logic and something creative, otherwise it's just a mess. So again, there's the crossover, right? And scientific discovery is beautiful.
Thank you so much. And by the way, the other students from the different departments, they are thanking you, like
Oh, thank
writing
you.
to you. So thank you so much, and thank you for everyone for being here. And I'm looking forward to meeting you again in another encounter. Thank you so much, Mr. Dreamy.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good rest of
Bye.
your
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.